Let's just start with the Optic topic, though, because obviously that is the biggest news. Like, when they announced their partnership, there's the problem, by the way. Everyone, it's fine if you say franchising, by the way. It's not really technically franchising. It's not the way it's franchise fee. It's not leave that's closed. Like, but here's the thing. In the same way as everyone calls all those player associations unions, when, again, legally they aren't unions. Like, it's just a colloquial term. So we don't mind if someone says franchising, but technically I'm going to say a partnership program or whatever the fuck, because that's just a simpler way to explain it. Obviously, the major news was Optic, the best team in the world. It's a far the lineup even going into that Envy team last year, so let's say like 15, 16 months. And then over the whole year, I mean, they were top 3 at every single one of the tournaments, including win one, obviously was second place at the Champions. Like, on paper, that is aggregated the best team in Valorant. Well, not only is the org not going to be in the partnership program, but as a result, I mean, I don't blame them, the team isn't going to stick together, it looks like. And especially because, I mean, if you ever saw those graphs that they do, where it's like how hard someone's carrying, like, it would always be like all the players here, and then Ye would be like up there, like, what the fuck, with who? And so if he's obviously the most eligible, like, free agent ever, and he obviously speaks English, all the rest of it. So the most recent news, and obviously this is where we're going to start speculating afterwards, before he was implying in interviews, like, we might stay together, like, I could have gone for this, like, $1 million to APAC or whatever. But the most recent news basically is Cloud9's going to swoop in and sign him, and they're trying to go, like, to a super team, right, George?
Yeah, so Cloud9 were, I guess, they sort of made it clear they did want Ye as soon as all of this stuff started happening. Because I think Nature actually said yesterday, and he sort of mentioned it, so I can mention it now as well.
Okay.
Was 100 Thieves were the ones that were trying to get Ye more than anyone, really. There were like deep negotiations there. They were discussing it. They really wanted him, but it ended up just falling through. And Cloud9 was sort of next on the plate to be like, yeah, we're going to have this guy, like, you know, serious offers coming in. And it did end up sort of going through a bit of a lengthy process. But I think the whole thing is that Cloud9 do want to build this kind of super team. The last player is unannounced, and I will try and get that out as soon as possible. But once you guys see who it is, I think you'll sort of understand why I use that term. But this is what I mean. I think, like, some people think that, like, some people had questions about the move, and realistically, I'm sitting here and I'm like, this guy's the fucking best player in the world. Like, you know, whatever team he's on is going to be somewhat good to some degree. But yeah, the whole move is pretty complicated, I think, considering the fact there was a lot of interest from 100 Thieves prior to them getting cryo. So I think that Ye did make the right decision, because I think that 100 Thieves were, I don't know. I think it's like, it really comes down to how he'll sort of gel with players. I know that's a very big thing for him. And I think that Cloud9 will probably be a good team for him to sort of do that on. Because I know Optic made him quite comfortable. Like, he was more than happy to stay with the Optic team. Like, the rest of the Optic guys, you know, the rest of the Optic guys wanted to play together. So
this was the thing that in the interview he did with Rich Lewis, he spoke a lot about how him working with FNS was, like, really important to him, because as an IGL, he made that environment that he knew that he could thrive in. And so that made, like, at the time that came out was before the Cloud9 thing, as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
So it's interesting because he'll be presumably under Vanity, like, so that'll be interesting. But also, conversely, I want to know where FNS is going, because there's no way that he doesn't get picked up.
Sure. Well, here's the thing, though. What we should do first is, because George obviously done that thing of like, no, but I can't tell you. I've got a secret.
I know, that was that very last. I was thinking, like, he knows.
So here's the question, though, Gio. What we can do now is we'll just do, like, process of elimination, like the game Clue, basically. So obviously the premise goes, Ye's going to join. They've already got Zeppa, who obviously is very good. Leaf's very good. Vanity as an IGL's pretty good. What spot is left, and who would you speculate, Gio? Who could it be?
Well, but hold on, because do we know that all of those players are staying?
It's just what it says on .esports. I can't confirm.
No, they're all staying. Yeah, they're all staying.
Okay. But because here's the thing also I want to add in, Gio. Remember,
it was Curry
if it's going to be a super team, it does imply with his secret that it's going to be a big name. So what role would it even be? Who could it potentially be, do you think?
I'm gonna
Spitball.
Hold on. I need to actually get the roster.
Because the problem I have is this, basically. Like, obviously, you are teased that it's a big name, right? The problem, I agree, because here's the problem. Like, Zeppa and Leaf, yeah, they're really good players. Ye's obviously mega. If this is just like a normal players to fifth, though, it's not a super team, is it? Like, if it's a super team, it better be like bangers all the way out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think again, I think one of the big questions that I will have, and I think that a lot of the fans will have once Rostermania is over, and this goes for almost every team, maybe like except the 100 Thieves, I guess, would be roles. Because nobody knows what the meta is going to be, and nobody knows how these things are going to pan out.
So how do Leaf and Ye share? Like, there's going to be some overlap there.
Yeah, of course.
And then you've also got to remember that rosters have got to be 6-man. They man rosters now.
Right, yeah.
So it could be that Leaf becomes the 6th man, and he shares that role with Ye. Because you don't know if is Ye going to remain like a chamber player, and if he is, are you going to bring in a separate Sentinel player, or are you going to rely on Ye to be then a Sentinel player going forward, even if Chamber falls out the meta? Because I don't really think that's the best use of Ye's resources.
No, Ye will. I think Ye will get free roam to do basically whatever
exactly.
he wants.
He's always going to be the opper, right? So presumably then either Leaf completely changes role or Leaf is the 6th man. In which case, what we need is someone who was in Zeta's role, which would be like an actual initiator, like a Sova player. In which case, I would want to see someone like Trent from the GOUD come in. I think that would be kind of cool, because I also think, and this is partially judging on how Cloud9 have done things in the LCS this year, but that combination of like a younger player and then like these more like really big heavy hitters like Ye, that would be kind of like cool, and like have that sort of like prodigious sort of vibe. And then you would want someone who can actually like be, I guess, a more mainstay Sentinel, which I think is also a really weird thing to kind of think about right now, because we don't know what that's going to look like, right? Because we've started to see Cypher come back in and be played, especially during Champions we saw that. But like in the time leading up to Champions, we really haven't seen a lot of like solid Sentinel role for a while. And you've got to question, like, is Killjoy going to come back? Because then you want to look at like players like Net, for example, who is a really good Killjoy, but we haven't really seen Killjoy be that relevant for a while. So is he someone that you want to bring in? Like, I think that's going to be the role that is the most meta dependent and will probably require a lot more of a versatile player to be picked for that sort of 5th role as a just in case. Like a just in case, we don't need you to be a Sentinel, and we're going to have a Chamber still, and then we need a Jet on the team as well, right? Like, I feel like that's going to be a little bit less defined than, something like, I don't know, what Vanity is going to be doing. He's just going to still be playing.
Do you want a totally off the wall one for you? Here's a good one for you. We'll see. We'll see George's poker face here. Because here's the thing. I think this is just a pure speculation. I think he thinks he's safe, right? And that you're going to be totally off the mark, because you're probably going to think like someone else from Optic, some other, and like you went with the GOUD. That's a pretty good one.
We also don't know if they're going to import.
Are you ready? Well, here's the thing that no one's thinking about. Do you know who Cloud9 signed this year? That is a very key figure in a certain scene that would be able to get players that you couldn't get in the past. They signed the guy who built the Gambit teams in CSGO, and they had a Valorant team that just split up, didn't they? So maybe one of their players comes to NA for a super team.
Nats would be a sick choice, I think, as well. Like, that was something when I was on Valoranting the other day, I spoke about that, like what the odds that Nats would be.
That would be, I mean, like I said, the guy who basically was behind the team is in Cloud9 now, so it's a pretty good link, right?
Yeah. So if you, thinking of like the Sentinel role, he, I guess, could be.
That would be a super team, right? Think how hyped that would be. Even George did that little hint, like, I hope they all gel to get like, no, come on, mate, whatever. We might be off base here, but I'm just gonna pretend that's real. That's
the point of Rostermania.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, it was the isn't it the Gambit guy that is it not I
Groove?
Remember, is it? Yeah, it's Groove, right? It's Constantine. Yeah, I think that's his. Yes. Yeah, that's his name. Yeah, I know that Cloud9 are quite a big fan of him and what he's done, because he's veteran pretty much. Like, he's done this. He's like, from what I know, he as a person is very much like sort of moves all the shit aside, just gets on with it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
super
he's
professional.
Really super professional guy. I will say that I think imports will be very interesting, because I feel like North America is one of those regions where they prefer everything to be just the way it should be, if that makes sense. They're not as in they're not a fan of like culture clashes. They're not a fan of things sort of not going their way. They're very sort of cliquey. You know what I mean? Like not in a bad way. I guess sometimes in a bad way, but most of the time that's usually how they operate. Like you're much more likely to get a North American into an EMEA team and that to work well than the other way around, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Just from my perspective on some of the players and how they sort of operate in teams.
The idea of EMEA in any esport importing an American feels very, very backwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I just feel like that. Yeah, because it's like when you think of like imports, we think of North America is this really rich region that has loads of money, and EMEA players are like, oh my god, let me go because this is fuckloads of money and I get to play for all the viewers and get all these kinds of like, do you know what I mean? Like that's just usually what they go for, but. I'm talking about if there was a player that like actually really wanted to win and all this kind of stuff, then maybe there could be a chance that happens. But no, I think I will say that some of the best. I'm trying to say this in the most sort of political way possible, but like again, some of the best players in EMEA do have offers from North America.
Sure.
And I think it would be naive to say that there's not a possibility that they could sort of go to North America. I think with some of the Russian players, it also comes down to like logistics as well, especially if they were to move to North America, because a lot of them have family. I know Nats especially. Sure, yeah. I think Nats is still a law student, I'm pretty sure, and he's still sort of doing that kind of stuff. And I think that
that's so embarrassing for all the like Western pros that are just like, waking up at 2 p.m, like rolling out of bed, like, I'm trying for scrims. This guy's just like was in the best team in the world. Then on the side, he's like just trying to get my law degrees.
Yeah, he is very.
Who's this triad? I know it's ridiculous.
He is very intelligent. I have to say, like he was built for like greatness. That guy, he's a legend. Like. Where you talk about pros that like actually put in the shift and really try and work hard and don't fuck around, like Nats is one of them.
I think it also says a lot when there is a team who kind of hasn't really existed as a team since the start of the year and they are still hot commodities now. Like that's nuts. Because I mean, like I've Redgar's another one which I've heard has been approached and by certain teams and stuff like that, and it's like. They haven't been able to play at like the top tier in fucking ages, and they're still in high demand. It just says a lot about those players.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, if you had to actually pick Gio, a player from Optic to maybe join you, would there be one that you would pick to join this team?
To join FNS. I mean, but specifically to join Cloud9, no, because that's. Like Vanity's already there, so there's no real need for FNS. But like, if I had to see Ye in a vacuum go somewhere with another player, I'd pick FNS. I mean, I guess when you consider like the roles that would be needed, like I don't know, it's hard because like the role that's the most obvious one there is Crashies, but I don't know if I'd pick Crashies over like another. Like someone like BCJ, for example, right? Like, I don't know if... And also, Crashies and Victor really want to stay together, right?
Right.
Because they're both unrestricted free agents, and they're kind of selling themselves as a duo. And, I mean, you definitely wouldn't need Victor there with Zeppa there. I mean, they both do the same thing, pretty much. So that's kind of a hard question to answer, because I think if Ye's going to Cloud9, the roles required, unless you're going to do a huge role shift, I just don't see a place for FNS and Vanity to be on the same roster.
Sure.
But yeah, given the roles required, I think that you could probably get higher value from plucking from somewhere else.
By the way, since obviously you pointed out earlier, like it could just be that they're going to swap roles around and no one knows what the meta will be. I will say, if fans out there are thinking more in terms of sports, are like, well, he's a striker, this guy's like a winger. Like, I will tell you, especially if they're making super teams, players are way more likely to actually, in my opinion, overestimate the ability to swap roles. And they really will just think like, like basically 3 players who were the best at one role to be like, well, if we all played together though, like we're all smart players, we could all, and if you know, like, historically, like those don't really work for those teams.
I think the word super team is such a fucking curse, like, because what usually happens is you get a lot of players who are picked for their individual ability, and without being seen as like what the adhesive between those players is going to be. What makes a really good team is a team who is greater than the sum of their parts, and usually when you're picking 5 players because they are all independently incredible, you're not going to get something that's greater than the sum of its parts, because you're going to have things like egos, different ideas of how the game should be played, different styles of playing the game. Like, they haven't been considered contextually, they've been considered in a vacuum. And I think that's always a really, really scary thing to base a team around. I remember seeing it in Rainbow Six a few years ago, where we had a Vitality and G2 tried to do the same thing, and both of them fell flat on their face. Team Liquid fucking failed at it this year in League of Legends. And it just happened. You just see it in all sorts of esports, and it just never works. So if a team themselves ever say like, yeah, we want to build a super team, immediately back off, sell your merch, give up your stocks. Like, that team's not going to do well.
Well, I mean, I will say it's very good headline strategy, though, I have to say.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Definitely works very well for us. So I've had no problems with it. But obviously, no, I mean, like, it's just one of those things, I think, especially, I don't think I would have said it if I didn't know who the last player was. And I think, it's one of those things where it's like, but I will say that it's not FNS.
Is it TENS?
No.
Well, the other person I was going to say is like, is it possible that this is the kind of roster that someone like Sick finds themselves on? Because Sick is known as being a very versatile player and kind of got shunted to the side a little on Sentinels. And his versatility could be something that is quite attractive to teams, especially like knowing that they don't know what the meta is, and there's an upcoming soft lock for the rosters, right? And then the hard lock is early next year. So someone like him, who is kind of known for being able to cover basically any role, like, and because coming from Sentinels, like, there's a certain amount of celebrity that comes with that as well, right? So
well, I think it will be a massive risk to bring someone like Sick, because I think he hasn't played for quite a while. Obviously, he took that mental health break. So it would be a bit of a risk. I think, I know that, so the player that they will get, I think, does have a lot of versatility. It's just he hasn't really shown that versatility for a little while.
Okay, that narrows it down.
It's a he, yeah. Yes, it is. So they're not.
What about this then? Before we shift off the Optic topic, one question I did have for you is this, George. To me, this was so obvious, and I'm amazed. Like, even though the story was like, we'd like to stay together. Dude, that's the thing I'm amazed by. With all these teams, remember, there haven't been that many teams in NA that have done much, like, internationally, the champions and the VCT. I'm amazed a lot of the other orgs didn't just go, look, if you actually want to come as an entire 5, we'll just wipe the deck and bring you in. Like, was there not more interest in that?
Yeah, I think, well, there was one organization who was willing to just basically go like scorched earth and just fucking get rid of their entire teams to sign them. But that never really materialized. And it was one of those things where it just became too difficult, because everybody obviously has their own, like, each individual negotiations they have to go through, and their own agents, and their agents tell them one thing, and then their players, and then their teammates telling them, oh no, you need to join for this amount, and all this kind of stuff. And there's just so much, like, there's so much little, like, intricate details involved that it just became sort of impossible in the end. Because it's not like you were shifting the entire team from just one place to another. There's just a lot more, like, intricacies, because they're all still very talented individual players. And I guess really the only sort of pair I guess you could make was, Vic and Crashies, because they just done that themselves. So I think there's definitely a lot more. There's just a lot of nuance to it, and I think it would have been a little bit too difficult. But again, I think a lot of it does come down to, I think, like, the North American culture, I think, is also partly to blame, because it's not impossible. We saw FPX are doing it with Na'Vi. All those players except for Ardis is going to go to Na'Vi. So, I think it's definitely possible. It's just, I don't think it's really feasible in that sense, because they also have a lot like, you know, as you can imagine, there was so many offers for all of those guys.
I'm sure individually they can all get more on the market.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll
They
also
sort of
say that's where even if in interviews they're like, we'd love to stay together. It's like, well, I won't be because I'm getting 1.5 million. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, there's that as well, right?
Yeah. It's like some of them want different things, you know, like unfortunately, like of course they're going to say like, yeah, I mean, I wish we could have stayed together, but it's like, we don't live in an ideal fairyland. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's one of those things where we sort of have to sort of wake up.
It's interesting. You know. One of the points that Juvenile made on Valoranting the other day, which I hadn't really thought about, was he compared it to when the Overwatch League was first formed. The Dallas Fuel kept on the Envy roster, and the Envy roster was the star Western roster, right, in Overwatch in the Apex days, and they were arse in the Overwatch League. And he was like, you know, carrying a full roster who has seen success previously into a new league when all of the other teams and organizations around you are restructuring, and they're going to be picking, like, kind of cherry picking who they think are the most valuable, because they have more choice to do that now. That's not actually going to guarantee you any success. And he was like, I genuinely don't think that if the entire Optic roster stayed together, they would have the same kind of outcome that they've seen this year. I just thought that was just a really interesting way of thinking about it.
The part that's naive there, basically, is you don't know, essentially, if you're buying at the peak and it was just about to drop off, essentially. Like, yeah, as you say, like, that lineup's been together a long time, especially as a core. Like, if anything, it would actually be a miracle if they stayed Omega for 2 years, wouldn't it? So... one thing we should actually say before I do move off the Optic topic is, obviously, we'll use actually this maybe as a moment, because there's a bigger discussion we also have to have, is the whole, like, why did a team or org not get into the franchise that's not a franchise, that's a partnership system, which obviously, on this one, by the way, as well, I will say, it's basically going to be pure speculation. Like, spoiler, I've even poked around, and all you need to know about the way that those leagues worked. I noticed this started big with OWL for me, right? Because even in League of Legends, actually, people behind the scenes will be a lot more forthcoming on info. But the way you knew on stuff like OWL, it really is just like, not only have you literally signed that document to say they can just sue you to the ends of the earth if you ever reveal anything, but also there is the fear that, like, you'll just be blacklisted to oblivion. Like, even in OWL, sometimes people, like, would just, like, behind the scenes not even cop to real stuff. Like, no, we don't know why the team, like, you know, even though they definitely do. So, like, all I'll tell you is when I've poked around some of these big ones that were, like, really conspicuous, some of them even claim themselves not to know, and that's all a big shock and it all came out of nowhere, even though it's like, really, like, some of them are way more borderline to me. It's like, you should have at least, they all, basically the joke is, like, this is like some mad game of musical chairs where apparently 40 kids thought they would get like 10 seats. So I kept saying all those past episodes, Gio, that's aged like a motherfucker now. I kept saying all those past ones. There are all these people just in NA alone who all think they're getting a spot. And it's like, and that's in a world, remember, where you haven't had the NRGs field the best roster. TSM wasn't even barely even in the game. There was always people waiting in the wings who potentially could have come in and scooped up slots from the best teams, as we've seen. So, George, give me like the basic overview on your take on this, right? Have you sort of figured out a general framework of what got people in, what didn't? Because obviously fans are using every metric as how good the team is, what the history of the org is, perceptions of if they have money. What do have you got a sense of what actually get people in or didn't?
Yeah, so I think there was two stages to this. I think there was two major stages. I think the first one where teams got, I guess, shortlisted, which is when basically Riot was like, oh, okay, the Optics, the TSMs, yeah, we'll put you through the shortlist. You know, we're going to choose between you guys and we'll get rid of like the lower tier, like Zero Marks, but like all these kinds of like organizations that aren't big in the slightest, obviously, are never going to make it in a million years. Once that shortlist happened,
by the way, like the GOUD, except like these people, it would have been a miracle if these orgs were getting it, if people don't know. It doesn't matter how good the roster is, right?
Yeah. So I think one of the, obviously, when that shortlist process happened, it was made apparent to me that, okay, these are just shortlisted because they're the most popular organizations and they're almost guaranteed to be in contention for the slot. And then the final, I guess, decision, I think, was not only based on financials, which is obviously data that me and a lot of other people are never going to be able to see in a million years.
Yes.
Obviously, because financial data is very important to private companies, which is understandable. Some of them are public. I know like FaZe are public as well, but even if you go public, it actually just makes your public perception worse by doing that, because you're like, oh, okay, so now we know 100% you're not making money.
Yes.
It's like, okay, cheers, well done. You've just inadvertently fucked yourself by doing that, but it's okay.
By the way, fans always miss that. You know, when fans see that, like, a giant Orcs lost 11 million, I guess they're going to shut down next year. It's like, right, the joke is they have so much money coming in as VC. They're choosing to spend 11 million instead of losing 3 million and having a way smaller squad. Like, actually, the game's sort of inverted in a weird way right now.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.